y'all, and welcome back to another video of My Creative Life with Kelssweetie, where we read books and we make art. Today we are talking about my September wrap-up. I am late getting all this wrap-up, mainly because I got sick for basically a whole week. After getting a little bit better, after that week I had tons of bronchitis, so I could not sit down for any given amount of time and talk to y'all because I was coughing so much. So I've been out of commission for almost 2 weeks. And as you notice, you might see that I'm in the same shirt from a recent video or two. That's because I'm batch creating, because I got sick during the worst time to get sick for someone who is reading horror and into Halloween, and that's the first week of October. So I did not have anything to post, which is why I went MIA for a little bit. And I'm finally getting to these. Now, I'll tell you, I have 2 in progress still that I'm trying to fit into even my horror reading and my Halloween reading, because really they're important, and I just got them off Libby. So they're really important for me to get to, so I've put them in with everything else. I have a DNF. Y'all might be surprised by my DNF. And I had some amazing 5 stars. I actually had a couple of 5 stars this last month. So it was a great reading month. So I do have a good amount on here. So let's get into it. As I mentioned, September was a great month, but it was Hispanic Heritage Month, Latino Heritage Month, specifically for my own personal reading. And I was really happy with everything that I got to. One thing that I noticed, and I've talked about this like in my February reading when it's Black History Month and during the I Love Black Horror Readathon that I host, I'm always looking for more Black witches. I'm always looking for more witches who are Black doing witchy stuff, and it is hard for me to find books that are in that space for some reason. You know what's not hard? Finding any sort of Latinas doing witchy stuff. And I think that, of course, that unfortunately there's the stereotypes that are being like kind of formed in that space, and also there's all these conversations of cultural Catholicism and how Catholicism is so close to these things of witchcraft, and culturally there's a lot of things within the culture that is associated in an Americanized way to witchcraft. So I think that a lot of these books maybe get signed on or published early because people can very much see it. I don't know. I think that these are a lot of things that it kind of brought up, because I read so many witchy books, and that's why I had so many 5 stars this last month. But it was really fun reading these. It was just very interesting to see. I have no problem if I ever was just like, oh, I want to read about a woman of color doing some witchy stuff. Oh, don't worry. Just find any sort of Latino author. You will find probably something in that space. But I had a great time reading them. Now, the 2 that I really wanted to get to, of course, everyone in the world wanted to read them, I guess. And I just literally got them off of Libby. So they are going to be a part of some of my Halloween reading and will get pushed to October. I talked earlier in this year about this, but I'm finding that I'm trying my best to really find more flexibility in my TBR, that simply because you didn't finish it during that month that you assigned it to, if you want to read the book, then you should read the book. Don't just push it to, oh, I gotta wait until next year to read it again, or another free month. Like, just read the book. So that is where I'm at right now, and I'm trying to keep that in mind as I push some of these books. And then I had a big DNF that I was surprised was a DNF, because y'all loved this book, and right now I really don't know why. So let's just simply get into the reviews and wrap-ups. First and foremost are the 2 books that are continuing on into my October reading, and that is Zero Saints by Gabino Iglesias. I started trying to read this on my own without without the audiobook and everything, and I found that this needs a little bit of an audio accompaniment. And the reason why I love, but at the same time I'm just kind of like, oh, I need to read this like with somebody actually saying these words, because it's just too clunky for me. And that's my own downfall. Please note that this is my own downfall. This book is written in a combination of English and Spanish. And I love that, actually. Like, I'm completely, I think it really feeds the authenticity of it and the story and the character and Gabino Iglesias himself. I read the the author's note in the beginning, and he had mentioned that when he first put out this book that a lot of people downed that they said it's inaccessible. Bump them. And he's basically said that. He was like, what are you talking about? This book is literally about somebody who is Latino, who speaks this language, going through these things, and you're talking about inaccessibility, then learn Spanish, then look up some words. And while I'm sitting here and I'm going, I'm already a slow physical reader. And I think that was the thing, is that I was just like, I was nervous about finishing things on time. But also I was sitting there and there were so many moments where I was just like, I want to hear somebody say this so that I can really be in it, rather than my brain like doing the whole, okay, let me read it, then let me translate it, then let me, like, it was just very clunky for my brain to just be trying to do it on its own rather than hearing an audiobook. Regardless, that's again like I feel like this is a conversation. This book is a representation of the conversation currently happening around Bad Bunny and the Super Bowl. It's like, you got 4 months to learn Spanish. Some things are not like for you. And you can still appreciate them and love them for also not being for you. And I feel like that is the perfect conversation in regards to this book right here, because there's just constant Spanish happening in here, and not just having these bits and pieces, which there's another book I'll talk about in a minute where I simply felt like it was a costume rather than an actual culture of the character, as opposed to in here. That is not the case whatsoever that we experience in here. So I did have the audiobook finally released, and I'm going to this is very short. I'm probably going to knock this out like one day when I'm trying to just get my steps in, walking around the house, and read, like tandem read, because I'm very looking forward to that. And also, I'm trying to practice my own Spanish. So I think that it'll be a lot easier to hear and read. So I know, because I have an easier time reading Spanish than speaking Spanish. And I think hearing and reading them and very conversationalist Spanish will be very helpful for me in that journey, and maybe finding more books that are like this, honestly. So something to kind of keep in mind when you pick this book up, because I think that a lot of people don't know that about this book. They, of course, see it recommended all the time, but they maybe don't know what they're getting into, and that, yes, you're going to have to use some brain cells to get through this book, even though it may be short. If you do not speak Spanish, you're going to need to work through this book. It will be worth it, though, because I've heard a lot of people talk about this, and even throughout the first couple of pages that I read, I felt like it was really, you were involved in it. Like, you really, really were. So I'm really looking forward to getting through this in this upcoming, honestly, in the next couple of days, to be honest with you all. The next book that is also moving into my October, because it's so important for me to read this book, and I'm just not going to just wait. Like, this was one of my biggest reads that I wanted to make sure that I read, and I couldn't get to it really physically, and my audiobook just was not releasing in time, and that was Detained. This is the journals of De Esperanza, who was Honduran and crossed the border around 13, and then was caught by border agents, and it was during 2016, and was forced to live in a border facility. Again, this is a very important book to read, and I'm not just going to be like, oh, the month's over, so let me just read this. I think that that's ridiculous, obviously. So I am going to get into this for sure in probably the upcoming week, because I do want to kind of, to have a clean progression. I do want to get to these as soon as possible now that I have their audiobooks released to me, and I don't want to wait, because I also think that it's important now more than ever to really understand and listen to this story. So both of those are moving into my October reading. Next is my DNF for the month. I did not finish this book because I hated it. I got through 25% and I was like, nah, this is not for me. And that was Anita Demonte, Laughs Last. Y'all love this book. It was a Reese's book club pick. Everyone in the world was reading this book, was recommending this book left and right. I hated this book. Now, I was listening to the audiobook, and I think that the actress who plays Anita is amazing. A lot of the parts that were written that were for Raquel, honestly, I felt were very strange and also frustrating. And when I was reading and hearing like her portions, I was really about to just turn it off. And then I would get to Anita's part, and the actress would just bring that character to life. And I would just move quickly through that portion. While she was still, there were parts of her that I felt like still felt a bit stereotypical, it was not in a way that necessarily felt inauthentic. I think that's the word I'm looking for, is inauthentic. I felt like the person who was reading for Raquel, I felt like the writing for Raquel, who is the younger 90s woman, who is like, there are two different points of view having conversations at the same time in here. Anita, who is an artist during the 80s, and Raquel, who is an art student during the 90s, are talking about at the same time and kind of discussing these things of art and culture and race in these spaces. Raquel's parts just were horrible for me. I feel like I would have been able to I really would have just wanted to read maybe the whole thing being Anita, rather than Raquel, because the other thing is too, is that there were many parts during Raquel's portions that felt completely inauthentic to me. Raquel is Latina. She's from Brooklyn. She goes to this it's not necessarily an Ivy. I don't think it's an Ivy League school, but it is a higher school, education type school. And she's an art student. The school literally has their POC programs are called Third World. They call them Third World programs. Like, that's the official name of them. And the thing is that's crazier is that the students divide themselves between first world, third world. So if you're like, oh, I went to a first world party, it was a white party. I invited her sometimes to third world parties. Those are black parties. Those are like parties that have people of color at them. She was saying that stuff. I was like, bro, I get that it's the 90s, but that doesn't make any sense. As a black person, there's one thing like it being the 90s or something and your administration is obviously being racist and tone deaf. It's another for you to feed into it. And it did not feel like, and it wasn't just her, it was even her colleagues. Like, there was one of her best friends was a black guy who worked at the DJ station who was showing her all this hip hop stuff, which also felt a little bit strange and awkward and stereotypical to me as well. But he also, like, all of them called them third world stuff or whatever the case was. And I was like, why are y'all using that? Why are you using that ideology? Why are you using that term? No one I know ever in school would have ever said, use this like completely tone deaf word and tried to co-op it or tried to just use it. We would have just said what we were like, what wasn't wild. I felt like that was so weird, and every time she did it, it was very cringy for me. There's another part in here where these the art history girls or whatever who are like this, like, they think of the bunnies from Mona Watt or whatever, but like art history wise. One of them is a black woman. She seems completely brainwashed, like not even putting two and two together on what her reasoning is on how she is. But then the other girls who are in this group, she literally sees her get completely like verbally abused by these women, these white women who are like, you got in here because of your race and that's why you got the program and all this other stuff, and just absolutely eviscerated. And this black girl is sitting there letting it happen to her, not saying a thing. It's the weirdest. There's so many weird things that are happening here. And while it's not that situation was unbelievable as far as her being attacked, it was very unbelievable to hear about how the people of color were moving in this book. Not even like how the white people were, which was the conversation of the art world in this book, but how all the people of color were moving. Her friend who's the DJ, he got a job at MTV, which also like an internship at MTV and stuff. Again, it felt like it was settling into all these different stereotypes, and it wasn't written well enough for this to be literary fiction. It's not YA. And it felt like YA. It was so weird. And then there was Anita's portions, which I did not hate as much. But then I also found out that this book is an actual, oh gosh, hold on a minute. Anna, oh, I need to look it up. Hold on a minute. Anna Mendieta. She was an artist during the 80s, was murdered by her husband, who was also an artist, out of jealousy. He took advantage and tried to cover it up and everything. It was a whole situation. This book is based on her life. And the family was not involved whatsoever, was never asked if this book could come out. There was no mention of it in the original releases of this book whatsoever. It wasn't until after a lot of heat happened that there was even a change in the foreword or the author's notes to mention Anna in any of it. But it's wild because they just took her life and plagiarized it throughout this entire book. I didn't find that out until afterwards when I went to go look up some reviews to find out if I was just crazy or if this book like gets better or if I'm supposed to be upset. Because at some point you have to ask that too if you're so upset at a book. Am I supposed to get upset the way I'm getting upset? Did the author want me to feel this way about the book? And so it was getting so crazy that I was like, wait, let me make sure before I give up on this because so many people love this book. I don't know why y'all loving this book so much. Because I looked up those reviews, it's not. I kind of even looked up like what does happens in the end. And it was not satisfying whatsoever enough for me to really continue reading this book. I'm not really gonna like spoil it for anybody else because I know there's other. This is a very popular book. I feel like there's other people out there who want to read it. I wouldn't recommend it, especially considering its background, considering like what Xochitl Gonzalez did in regards to really erasing this woman's history, which is insane because that's what this book is about erasing women and their work from history and everything. So again, that's insane. Ana Mendieta's life being plagiarized like that really left a bad taste in my mouth. And then also dealing with this Raquel character and not feeling like there's really a character arc in the long run, considering how they're being written in here. I'm DNFing it, and it will be getting donated at the end of the year. I already have it with my donate pile. I got through 25%. That's all I could do. That's all I could do, y'all. Moving from that into the actual reads that I got to in September, and a 5-star for me, Jawbone by Monica Ojeda. I have been meaning to read this book for years now. I picked it up, put it back, picked it up, put it back, found something else to read instead. I finally said, okay, I'm going to read this. Loved it. I described it after finishing it and I did my review on Instagram. I was like, it is a combination of The Craft and Heathers and Mean Girls and like 5 different other things that are like witchy teenage girl goodness, all into one thing, but like in the eyes of this very gay, creepy pasta type of lens. I think at first you need to get used to the writing in here, like how Ojeda is kind of writing these characters. What's the cadence? Because you're wondering what is the connection between these girls and their teacher who is off her rocker. Like if it's any clear indication that background checks aren't happening for teachers in some areas, this is it. This is absolutely it. And I don't want to ruin it for anybody because I think that thinking and moving through those conversations is a part of the experience of reading this book. This book is really about girls' shame, puberty, learning about your sexuality, and especially learning about it in a space that's very restrictive. So all of these girls go to Catholic school, and 2 of the girls who are very best friends, you can tell absolutely are in love with each other. But growing up in a space, in a world that's so restrictive, they don't know what to do with that because there's no answers for them. And so they put that energy into places that are actually very scary for them, very harmful for them, because they don't have anywhere else to put those feelings or those emotions, or don't have any examples of how to act on those emotions or act out or move through those emotions or even ask questions around those emotions. And I think that that's the other conversation too, is how scary that can be and harmful that can be for not just the person, but also for those around them. Because our who is it? Fernanda? Oh no, or Annalise. It's Annalise. Annalise is scary. Like very scary. Think of Regina George, but she's like gay and as crazy as like Nancy Downs from The Craft and revengeful and all of these things. I think that it's pushed as a horror because there are many horror elements in here, but in a way that's very new generation creepypasta, which is exactly what they're referencing in a lot of this. Another thing, and I think the most horrific portions really are their teacher, who is clearly, she wasn't well to begin with in regards to her mother who abused her. But once her mother passes, she does not deal with her grief well whatsoever and goes through a huge bout of depression that is taken advantage of by these girls. And in the end becomes deadly to one of the girls. There's so many things that are happening in this book that you can't even really explain everything that's happening in this book. But I think those are the top level things on why this book is amazing. And again, I think that unsettling, evil, but horror, but also drama, but like, is it a horror? Like, I think that around this time of year, people say like, oh, The Craft. And you're like, The Craft isn't a horror. And it's like, no, well, what is it then? it can't just be a drama. It's something more than that. And that, I think, is where this kind of lies in an even more, honestly, gorier and horror type of space, in my opinion. But even like more girl centric than the craft, like in a very, like I said, mean girls type of way. This was a 5 for me, easily 5. I absolutely love this. I can see why it is constantly being recommended. I will hold my breath and hold back on reading Nefando by Monica Ojeda, her other book that's really well known, just because I know that that book is hard, but it will be read. I think now that I have a better idea of how she writes, and that's one thing that I also noticed throughout all of the writing this last month, is there is a poetic cadence to a lot of the writing in from like Latino authors. I've noticed. I don't know if that is because a lot of these are translated. There's a possibility that that's why in the first place. But the way that some of these very horrific things were being described were beautiful in their essence, in a way that, like, I know, again, like going back to that conversation of culture, where there's these very aggressive and horrific things that you may see in like Catholicism, but written in a way that's so poetic or sculpted in a way that is so gorgeous that both of these things are combining. I feel like that's a conversation in this writing, or apparent in this writing. I think that, again, if you've grown up in a culture such as that, it bleeds into all of your influences. So I cannot recommend this enough. I get why it gets recommended all the time. If you are at all into the whole pink horror, or this idea of horror that's lit fic, that's queer, that's women, and friendships and girls and mourning and grief and craziness and whatever, you will love Jawbone. Absolutely, full stop. Next is something that, again, was gorgeous and horrific all at once. And I think that I put it off for so long because I thought that it was going to be gothic. And I think I usually don't like gothic horror whatsoever. But this last month has taught me maybe you only need to read gothic horror from Latine writers. Like, that's it. The Hacienda. Finally read it, y'all. Finally read it. Was amazing. Absolutely loved it. I think that it was horror. I mean, there was one part that was so, and again, it also has a male witch in here who is also a priest. Love that concept. And when he is fighting this entity that's in the hacienda, there is this scene that is so, this is what I'm looking for when I'm talking about witches, is something very powerful. I think that's the best way that I can describe it, and horrific in its power. Not simply something cute, but like, we've unlocked and we're dealing with things that we didn't know that we were supposed to be dealing with, we shouldn't have been dealing with in the first place. You know, we have our main character. She moves to this hacienda after the Independence War, and there's a lot of historical conversations happening in here as well, which I did really love as also. And she's moved into this place that's clearly haunted, and everybody wants to act like it's not. I think that if you loved Crimson Peak, this is something that's Crimson Peak, but less Victorian, far less Victorian. But that same idea of, I'm moving into this home for survival. I'm excited about the possibility. Finds out, no, actually, honey, you moved into a haunted house and you may not survive. And then she falls in love with this priest. And it's like this very dramatic and passion and everything that's filled in it, that in some parts, I will say, at the end, I was a little bit like, I wish we would have ended more on a horror note than a romantic note. And that's something just to keep in mind with this. There's romance in here. There's absolutely, and it ain't closed door romance either. I think that that's something to note, and it ends on that note. It's not really ending on a horror note. I think you have to wait until around 20% to really get into something more horrific than gothic, and you're moving. And I think that a big chunk of it before that last like 10%, I absolutely loved, and it felt like a horror novel, but it's also unveiling like drama of all the things that were happening with this family in this house, and with the servants, and with what was happening during the war itself. And then once all of that's over, you get to the end, and it goes back to this like quietness of a romance novel. And I think personally, I wouldn't have wanted it to end that way. It wasn't bad, like overall in the conversation of an ending, but it wasn't necessarily what I would have wanted. I understand, again, why this is recommended so much. I think that this last month was me catching up on books that I've seen recommended 24/7. Oh, and this was a 4.5 for me or something. Literally, that half was taken off just because of the ending, the romance portion. Next, I finally read Woodworm. I'm finally read this gorgeous, gorgeous book, and I'm happy to say that I can keep this gorgeous book because I loved it. It was strange though, and I think that when I wrote my review for this one, I mentioned you really do need, this is a rereader. You need to reread it because the way that Martinez decides to kind of unveil information and the history of this home and this family to you, you're not fully understanding what is the point, what's the purpose, what's the main thing for this book in the first place until you really get to the end and you understand that this is a conversation and that this is a book about revenge. And then you're like, oh, that's why you were giving me all of that in the beginning. I spent so much time trying to understand what the plot point of this book was that getting all of that history and information in the beginning, I wasn't paying as much attention as now I realize it was informing. So because of that, like I was having a good time. I loved the relationship and the very imperfect characters of this our grandchild and the grandmother and everything in this book. But I was just so busy trying to figure out, okay, what's the plot point? What's the plot? Like I'm getting all this other information. When are we going to get to the plot? Is this the plot? No, this doesn't seem like the plot. Are we in the present? Are we in the past? Now knowing how the book ends and where it was going, I think rereading it would be smart because then you're sitting there and you're like, oh, okay, I get now what you were doing or why it was giving us conversation and reason of why they end up doing what they do in the ending to this family, this rich family. It's really a conversation of class politics, of feminism in this very small town and how women become witches overnight or how, and if a family really is witches or really are witches or are they just made out to be witches? And in some cases it's both. It's very much both. I think that I loved how the conversations of witchcraft were being in this and also even these portions that were horror. I think this isn't a traditional horror necessarily. I don't think that you're going to be sitting here going, oh, there's a lot of blood or anything like that. It's very much spirit based. And it's also unsettling in some portions, like these prayer cards that are like a little off, or what they do that's a little bit like, oh, that was extreme or something, or even how the house kind of haunts them and what this family kind of did. So I do recommend it. I get why it gets so many recommendations, but I recommend it with the idea of one, either when you first read it, you kind of just let it take you. You listen to what's happening, you're paying attention to what they're talking about. Don't worry so much about like, what is this leading up to or what's the plot point, but just read it. You'll get there. Or if you have read it again, just read it again. Just read it again because now you know what the ending is. So now you have context for what all those things were. If you're somebody like me who kind of wants to know why they're being told things for context reason. I gave this around a 3.75-ish or something, or a 3.5, mainly because I think the reading style or the writing style is something to get used to or that you kind of need some extra instruction on before you start reading it. The next one that I read, I don't have a copy for, but I am ordering it in the mail, and that is Goddess of Filth by V. Castro. I finally read it. Oh my gosh, I love that book. Another 5-star. And again, it had to do with a group of high school girls. Instead of where Jawbone was happening in, I believe they were in Argentina. I'm not certain though, but I know that they were outside of the States. This is instead happening within Texas, and it's a group of Mexican girls and them kind of ending their high school years and going into college years and that summer between those years and what's happening. And it's a very coming of age type of book. Like the more that I sit with it, the more that I realize about it. It's also a great book for Indigenous Heritage Month coming up in November, in my opinion, because it has a lot of conversations around Nahuatl and like the indigenous and of Mexico and indigenous goddesses and gods and all of these that were of the earth and who were forgotten. And that's the main point of a lot of this book. Entity that ends up possessing one of them. is a goddess of filth, but she is an indigenous goddess that has been forgotten by their heritage and refuses to be forgotten, and embodies like one of their friends to simply have her history written, because it has been lost. It has been, and I think that this is an amazing concept that was brought up in one portion of it, and I brought up to my partner who is Latino. He was about the fact that like this indigenous heritage is constantly trying to be refound, and the parts of it that were actually written down were written by colonizers, or was written even in a colonist language. You know, a lot of those languages have been lost in the first place. So rediscovering and trying to refine these culture points that were indigenous to your actual people are extremely hard. But how do you know what is real and what is factual and what has been left out simply because it was easier or it was more aligned with their moral beliefs or whatever the case was? That is the hard part for everyone, I think, who's trying to uncover and discover anything that was indigenous to the Americas before colonists came. So much of that information was lost, and as we slowly try to rediscover it, we're putting those broken pieces back together, and we're going to miss cracks. There's going to be tiny chips that are missing and everything, and that's hard because some of those chips may be context. As for the goddess of filth, the context is that while she is a goddess of filth, it is not, and she may seem like she is something evil. She's not. She's actually just all of it. She's neither evil or good. She's just all of it, and even the parts that we've been shamed into thinking is evil. I think that by the time you get into that portion of the book, it really sets a different context for what's been happening and the possession that has happened. And this crazy priest who is obviously possessed with something else that ain't godly, who is on their tails and tracking them down, and a mother who is so fearful but shamed and shameful of her past and her and everything that has fully pushed her to treat her friends, her daughter's friends a certain way and everything. There's so many conversations happening about culture and community, and growing up in any as a person of color in a Christian community, and how it has affected we operate, how we move through our conversations around anything that is indigenous or isn't considered Christian morally or whatever the case is. But it's through the eyes of our main character, who has a lot of lack of self-confidence because of the classism she's in as the oldest daughter, and having to try and raise and help her sisters and her family, and what opportunities she's not being able to take on because of those things, and in response feeling like she's not much of anything. And that conversation, which is the coming of age part, that is very interesting. I loved it. It was 5 stars, y'all, as you can tell. Again, uh, they even mention the craft in the book. It's a lot of fun, and it's gritty, and it has amazing thought, like provoking thoughts and messages within it, while just being a kind of vibe that I absolutely love. So I, of course, am getting it for my shelf. It's something that's going to sit on this shelf with like Jackal and The Woman Could Fly. Like I think one day I'm going to do a lineup of like my favorite books of all time that are clearly all similar in trope. But I had so much fun reading that one. I didn't have the actual book, but I was like, I've been wanting to read that. It's available, it's a novella. Let me just knock it out. And I'm so glad that I did. Next one that I finished was Las Boutiquines. This was by Ivan Mona Lisa Ojeda, and it is like a short story collection of stories of being queer and Latine living in New York. I really did love this. I didn't really know what to expect. I didn't know if they were going to be connected. I didn't understand when like maybe the time frame would be. It's definitely clear that this is during probably the 80s, 90s era for sure, just based off of what I was reading. And it covers a lot of the conversations of being queer in New York during that time. Being arrested, what people did. I mean, you know, in order to get out of those certain situations, what were the actual laws of those situations, what that experience was trying to get out of there during this time, especially conversations of trying to get legalized marriage and getting married, drug usage, mental health, sickness, illness, death. Oh my god, all of these different things are being brought up in here. And I loved, they were very like bite-sized, like slice of life type of pieces that were taking on very dark topics, But I do feel like there was a lightness in how Ohida was writing that didn't focus so much on the depressiveness of it. You know, one of the characters ends up having a bad trip and taking themselves to the hospital in order to, you know, make sure that they're fine and they don't overdose or they don't end up in a bad way, and then being put on 72-hour hold, but not knowing that they were being put on 72-hour hold in the first place. And instead of it kind of ending up in this space that's very depressive or dark, they don't end up on actual 72-hour hold because luckily the doctors realize like why they were there in the first place and all of that, and they end up, you know, treating them luckily with some respect. I think that in a lot of these stories and a lot of queer stories, we unfortunately see a lot of darkness and hardly any light, or like constant disrespect. And as somebody who may not be like, oh, like somebody who is identified immediately or disrespected immediately for being queer, since I am cisgendered and bisexual, I am a Black woman, and I do have that disrespect as such. It's a different type of disrespect for sure, but I do experience it. But one thing that I do know is that it's not a constant. And I think that sometimes we find in books, especially that have to do with queerness during a certain time frame or era, there's a lot of darkness and depressiveness that we put into these stories in an effort for education, and they're completely valid stories. But what we also fail to kind of really see, and a lot of it, is the humanness of these people, and that they do have moments where people understand them and respect them and know them as humans themselves. And I think that it's important when we're telling stories to remember that you are talking about humans and that they are experiencing moments of humanity every now and then. Or else they wouldn't be here, which, you know, of course, there's the opposite of that. And there are people who experience these things that they're lacking humanity. And of course, they end up in these episodes of horrible depression because of it. And that is important to also acknowledge. But it's a balancing point for sure, and I think Ohita does a really great job of finding that balancing point to talk about these things. And I don't believe that she wanted it to be this constant, that they wanted it to be this constant depressive episode, but more so, yes, we're talking about dark situations. They're in dark situations, but this isn't just one long depressive episode. So yeah, I think that it's very complicated, but I very much enjoyed this. I ended up giving it, I think, like a 4.5 or a 5. Again, I think that it was really great, and I would definitely recommend it to anybody who kind of is looking for a short story collection. On the other side of that, which I did not too much enjoy, it was very weird rating this book, was Loteria by Cynthia Palaio. This is a collection of short stories. I don't think that every story is written by the same person. Maybe she did write all of them. I mean, I'm not seeing anything that says that she didn't. The reason why I'm wondering, or why when reading this, I felt like it was written by so many different people, the tones in each story, there are 54 stories in here. And the tone in each one felt like it was a collection of many authors and voices and tones and writing styles rather than one author. And sometimes it did not work for me. There were some stories in here that felt far too long. There were some stories in here that felt far too short. I don't think that personally I ever feel like I got my footing in here, because 54 short stories are a lot. I realize there's one for every card, and every one is kind of like loosely based on what that card is or what it represents, and then it ends in this story that's about this loteria reader, and that story also felt very confounded. I think that there's some stories in here that felt like they were doing a lot all at once, or trying to fit a long story into only a couple of pages, so you didn't feel very focused on what you were reading. I think that I ended up giving this a 3 based on the idea of running my own indie zine and wanting to know more about folklore from other cultures. I think this is a great book to reference because every single one of these stories has to do with some folklore from different cultures and different spaces. And I found myself wanting to look up more about certain stories, or like monsters, or, you know, entities that were being brought up in here. But as for the stories themselves, I did not find them very like, nothing really stands out. No story in here I was like, "Oh, I really love this." Like, except for that very last one, and I think that it's only because that it was the last one. I don't feel like there was a werewolf one in here, but there was also another. I just felt like there were so many things in here that felt disconjoined and not like it was one cohesive project. So I feel like I'll be probably keeping this mainly based off the idea of reference. And I think I really like the idea of what this book is and what it provides in that case. But as a book, as like reading and enjoyable and any sort of entertainment, I think I ended up rating it around a 2. I was like, this is a 2 for as far as its reading and enjoyment. It's like somewhere around a 3 as far as something more referenceable. And even the idea of like, there's so many different cultures that are covered in here. Like, there's so much, the Caribbean is based in here. It's not just simply one look at a very specific Latino culture. And I appreciated that. I really did. But I just wanted more out of these stories. I felt that as well. I just think that it was a tall order to try and write 54 short stories around all of these folklore with the idea of loteria in mind. And I don't think they always they really hit it. There were enjoyable stories in here. The problem is that they weren't impactful enough for me to even remember what those stories were. I obviously enjoyed portions of the story, or else I wouldn't have kept on reading it. There were just not enough in here for me to fully remember them. Yeah, I hate that though, because I feel like what it aimed to do, and even again from that reference point, it's giving you so many different backgrounds and cultures. The amount of research that had to go into this had to have been immense. At the same time, I feel like there were so many things in here that just were missing overall. So that is my wrap up for September. I got through 6 books. I got through 6 books. So we're still doing great. What I think that I've noticed is, one, novellas are slept on. I need to start reading more novellas. As I think one thing that like maybe next year, or even to keep in mind as we're moving to the end of the year, you start to lose a little bit of steam. And then you also have all of these, you have the bird months are here, so you have holiday stuff, you're going out constantly, you're hanging out, you're having activities. The time for reading keeps going down and down and down. And so finding novellas to try and move through during this time, I think is important to kind of have these wins. I think last month I had a lot of books that were obtainable because they were novellas. I think I read like 4 novellas last month. And even now working through Zero Saints and stuff, that's another novella as well. So I think that that's something to keep in mind, because I think going into October and having like 2 physical reads, which I'm moving through, and the Good House, I'm concerned about it, y'all. I'm not gonna lie. And November does not seem like it's going to maybe, I don't know. I think I have a lot of short story compilations in November. Now looking at what's possibly going to be that TBR. But I think it's been interesting to kind of realize that like maybe that's what I need to be putting in my TBR near the end of the year, just to have something to move through and not feel like it's very daunting. But I did enjoy all of my reading from last month. I've obviously found so many like 5 stars, but it was also a mixed bag, because the ones that I did not like, I really did like. But I'm also happy that I'm still moving through some of my TBR from that month, because I do feel like those books were really important for me to finish. My Libby Hole just was not working with me. And we are moving through October, and I feel like I'm starting to now get my feet up under me a little bit. As per usual, I feel like the first week or 2 of a month, I'm like, we're moving, whatever. And then the 3rd week I hit it, and it's like 3-4 books are finished. Because even last month, technically I finished like 6 books, which is on the higher end of my average, which, let's just talk about how big of a jump that is from me finishing like even around 4 books at the top of this year. Like, I remember I finished so many books at the top of this year. It was like 7 I finished in January. Really big start. And I was like, never finished that many ever. And I feel like it's been consistent like almost every month throughout the rest of the year that I've been hitting around, depending on lengths of books, and especially considering everything going on. I've been really, really happy with just what my cadence has been and how I've been finishing books. I feel very good. I have currently finished 59. I got like a little counter back here because I just love seeing something physical. But I have finished 59 books so far this year. My goal is 64 books, 65 books for the year. And I am in just October. I think that I will hit my goal by November, and that is very exciting. I'm not going to try and jinx it, but to hit my goal before the end of the year would be amazing, because last year I barely made my goal. I got sick, and that's the only reason I was like sat down for a while enough for me to actually hit my goal. And the year before that, I did hit my goal pretty around this time, actually. I think it was around like the Burr month I hit my goal. So it feels good that, you know, that goal back then was like 35 books. I've nearly doubled that this year. So very, very proud of it. But last month was a great reading month, and I think it did open up a lot for me. And also it made me realize just what I love in a book, and that I need to read more Latina authors, because obviously that's the space that really understands what I need out of a book. So if you like today's video, please subscribe down below. I will be moving through some more recommendations, and I'm doing Halloween-a-thon this year, so if you follow me over on Instagram, I'll be doing an update, weekly update of where my reading is over there. I'm going to be doing some recommendations soon enough. I have some things in mind. I just put out a recommendations video. I'm doing some things, so some vlogs are going to be coming out. There's a lot that's going to be happening around here. It's the Burr month, so expect a lot to be popping up if I don't get sick. That's the only thing that slowed me down this last week, but we're getting back into it. So please subscribe if any of that sounds good to you, and please like today's video if you liked it. Please let me know down below what you read last month, and if you read any of the books that were on my TBR and what you thought of them. I'd be excited to hear about them, and also to have some more books going on my TBR, although I'm on a book ban for now. If I get this down, I'm hoping to get it down, and then I can get back in the game. New year will definitely be like, let's reevaluate if I need to be on a book ban or not. But I gotta move through these books in order to do that. But please like today's video if you did like it, and thank you again for watching. I will see you on the next one. Bye.